Hi, colleagues. It's John Fischetti along with Scott Emig, and welcome to We Will Get Through This, Transformative Leadership for Disruptive Times. And Scott, it's great to see you. Hope you're doing well.
Hey, John, I'm doing well. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. Always good to be here with you. And we are very fortunate today. We have a wonderful guest who joins us from the East Coast of the United States. It's Carlos Beato. And Carlos is a high school principal, very large high school. And Carlos, wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Scott and John. Thank you for having me.
Carlos, to kick this off, just to give our readers a sense of the reality in which you've been working for the past year or so now, can you give us a little bit of a sense of your community and your school?
Yes, absolutely. So our school, International High School at Langley Park, is composed of 100% English language learners or students who were formerly classified as English language learners. We have over 24 different countries represented, over 14 different languages, but 90% of our students come from a Latinx background. So yeah, Spanish-speaking background.
And Carlos, if you describe the last year in your journey to educate everyone in the madness that has been the COVID experience, give everybody a sense of how it's impacted you, your colleagues, and your community.
Yeah, well, our school community has not been back into the school building since March of last school year. We've been virtual all along since March. We're still virtual, and there are hints here and there of us returning, but not 100% yet.
How has that impacted your student body? What's been the good, bad, and ugly of this situation for you?
Oh man, it's impacted our community tremendously. We work with a community that is so keen to working directly with adults and building relationships. And so when you go into a virtual environment, it's that much more difficult to build relationships, especially when you're dealing with new ninth graders, possibly new to the country, and trying to build that relationship over remote learning. It's definitely very nerve-wracking, to say the least.
Carlos, are you finding that you're having families or students kind of pulling back from their educational journey because of this?
Yes. Number one, the English language learner population is a very transient population to begin with. And so, at least in our area, and yeah, there's definitely so much movement happening in terms of kids leaving the district or kids that we haven't been able to find, period. It's unfortunate because as a school, we were moving in such a positive trajectory, and we're getting such great outcomes with our students. And the pandemic definitely has put a little bit of a dent there. We're seeing high chronic absenteeism rates, which I know is true across the board, at least in the United States right now. It's been insane. Student motivation is down by a lot. Kids dealing with depression who would normally have a space to deal with it in school with other caring adults, maybe in spaces where they're not 100% safe and they're not able to show that vulnerability. So it's impacted our population quite a bit.
Carlos, you've gone through school your whole life, have your doctorate, you've been a leader and a thinker. Did anything prepare you for this as a leader? What have you pulled out of your reservoir to be able to pull into to help guide through this?
I don't think there's any education possible that can prepare you for something like this, especially when it happens so randomly and in the middle of a school year. But I would say a lot of the things that we do in normal brick and mortar school building are transferable into this virtual learning space. Some of the things that are possibly harder is what I talked about. That relationship building might be a little harder if you've never met the students in person. But I think that one of the things and lessons that I've learned is that partnerships matter 1,000%, whether you are in school, in person, or you're in this virtual learning space. I think that partnerships allow you to leverage all of the different strengths that partners have, and then be able to provide that wholesome education to students, be it providing food because there's food insecurity, or reaching out to an organization that will help provide shelter for families. And those are two of the biggest things that we've dealt with outside of dealing with the technology gap.
That partnership you just described is a wonderful term. Thinking of the partnership between a teacher and her students that forms in the face-to-face space, can you think of an example where something's transcended this technology we're using today that feels like, in spite of all of it, we do have connections like those partnerships going that forge teaching and learning relationships that are so vital for a school?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can automatically think about our advisory, and how, we know that research states that teachers are the number one contributors to a student's academic success. And so when you build these smaller pockets of communities within a school building through an advisory system where your teachers are trained in social emotional development and giving academic feedback and reflecting and all of these things, we have a very strong circle culture in our building. And so things that are resolved in our building are served in a circular space, which makes for an interesting circle virtually, right? But we're able to still have it because you can still see all of the kids' faces, and you can set the parameters and create a PowerPoint along, you have tools that can help support that process.
Carlos, just listening to you talk about all the initiatives that you have going on that are not just academic, but hugely social and also well-being of your families. What are you doing? Like, how are you able to maintain the well-being of your staff and yourself in this context?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, as a leader, you have to come with an empathetic stance, and you have to be able to recognize that people are in very different spaces in their lives at this moment, in this time. And so that is first and foremost the number one thing as a leader that you must do. And then we're doing so many things for our kids and that I'm really proud of as a leader. We've used some of our funding to close that food insecurity gap. So we've, since last school year in the spring, we've been using an organization to help deliver food directly to our students' homes. So we identified specific students who we know are in critical need of certain supports. And so we've delegated different opportunities for different students based on their needs. And we have an amazing student success office composed of 2 counselors, 2 social workers, a pupil personnel worker, a parent outreach caseworker, a community school coordinator, which all in all, it's not just about academics. And the reality is we need to tend to these social spaces before we do any academic space, because we know that if a kid is hungry, they're not going to be paying attention in class. If a student has no home to live in, they might not have internet, and that means that they can't access class to begin with. And so we are 100% aware of those things and understand that we need to meet kids where they are in order to help them get to the next level. In the adult space, we've gotten a lot of different supports, but we connected with an organization that specifically supporting our teachers in their own social emotional development, and just supporting them one-on-one and in small group spaces. Our student success office, again, also provides one-on-one sessions to our teachers as well, and not just the students. And it's an all-around process. Going back to partnerships, we are connected with the University of Maryland School of Social Work, where we have, I believe it's something like 6 to 8 interns right now, and they're also providing that support. That's why I say it's so important to understand and know your community and know what's around you and know what types of supports your students and your families need, because in that way you're able to identify those resources along the way and be able to provide them in cases like these where it becomes an emergency, sort of.
Carlos, I'm guessing you must have had loss in your community, either on your staff or extended family of your own, as well as in the student population. How have you handled the grieving from a distance from this tragedy we're going through together?
Yeah, we actually have a grief group in our school, and that's part of, again, our student success office, led by one of our counselors. And that's one of the ways, but we've also integrated social emotional check-ins into all of our meetings, every single one of our meetings, including collaborative planning time for teachers, school-wide meetings, whatever meetings we have, our check-ins are always around social emotional check-ins. Whether you're an advisory or you're in your regular class, we've trained our staff to be able to provide sort of at the surface level before getting to that student success office, some of those supports, social emotional supports.
Well, Carlos, John and I first met you about 9 months ago, and for another project, and we were both amazed at your experience, given your youthfulness, and just the depth of wisdom that you shared. So we're going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit and ask you to think about your counterparts around the world who are navigating this pandemic, this situation right now. And what's a piece of advice that you would give them, or something you would challenge them to do within their school walls or within their virtual walls?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very easy in a situation like this to let go of the rigor and, be all lovey-dovey. And I think that that's a mistake that we make as educators, right? I think we still run our building with a tough love kind of mentality, where we're going to give you rigor, but we're going to give you every single type of support that you could possibly need. And I think that as a leader, and any school leader around the world can lead by example, and just and I'm so sorry that I got stuck there, but we can lead by example and just, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. We're talking really about advice for principals around the world. And I think the idea of maintaining the rigor with the empathy and compassion is fantastic. In fact, you're the first person we've talked to that said, we're going to keep the high standards. And so keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah. And keeping the high standards, especially for the population that we work with in our school building, English language learners. We have multilingual learners across the world that are refugees and have migrated to other countries and still need that language development support. So my number one thing is we never let go of that rigor, because we understand that once we are out of this, nothing else really is going to have changed in terms of expectations that we have for kids to be successful. And I quote unquote that, right? Like, what is success and what it means to different communities across the world. But I would say never let go of the high stakes, but do it with love, compassion, empathy, and understanding where your community is coming from.
Fantastic. Scott, I have another follow-up to that, if that's okay. So this is advice for principals in Maryland or anywhere in the world. When you get to go back to school, and let's assume it could be a little bit this year, but let's assume August, you're starting a new year, we're COVID safe with some vaccines to everyone, and it's all back to whatever COVID normal will now be. What's something you hope we don't go back to that was part of schooling a year ago before we had to do all of this? What's something we've learned that you will hope your staff and your community allow you to continue that you've learned actually works?
Yeah, I mean, if I had a magic wand, I would probably say let's get rid of archaic attendance policies, grading policies that don't necessarily meet us and meet our kids where they are in this moment. And if we've learned anything about this pandemic, is that learning is very fluid. And at the end of the day, no assessment is going to tell you how much a kid has really learned, because there are flaws in assessments. There are flaws in the ways that we've designed things. And ultimately, I think one thing that I will never give away and never give up is that sense of culture and togetherness, and that sense of just community. That's one thing that I'm most looking forward to in going back to in person and being able to do those circles in person, right?
Carlos, we really appreciate you taking the time to share your insight with us. Always enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Scott and John.
Yeah, Carlos, you are a true inspiration as a leader, as a person, as a man, as a colleague. And we really admire you for what you're doing in the front lines of this. I think one of the benefits is that teachers and principals are first responders, and the need for the caring, compassionate, loving environment, but with the high academic expectations, has made schools even more relevant. And I think if anything else, your community now appreciates you even more and can't wait till they're back to be able to tell you that in person. Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our listeners out there. We appreciate the interest in this topic, and we're glad to have you on this ride.
Yep, Scott, we'll see you next time. And we will get through this. We appreciate everybody.